Thunder rolled across the Hawthorne estate, shaking the glass walls of the mansion. The hallway lights flickered as Alexander Hawthorne pushed through the double doors of his master bedroom, coat dripping, jaw locked. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice cut through the dark like broken glass. Amara Johnson shot upright on the king-sized bed. Her hair was a tangle of midnight curls, her eyes wide with disbelief. On either side of her, the twins, Ethan and Eli, slept soundly, their small bodies curved toward her warmth. For the first time in months, there were no screams, no thrashing nightmares, only peace. "Mr. Hawthorne," she started, breath-catching. He stepped closer, every inch of him radiating fury. "You're in my bed." "I didn't mean. Do you take me for a fool? You think I hired you to play mother in my own room?" Amara's hands trembled, but her voice stayed soft. They were scared. They wouldn't sleep anywhere else. Ethan had a nosebleed, Eli kept calling for his mom. Enough. The word thundered out of him. "Get away from them." She flinched but didn't move. "Please. You'll wake them." His palm cracked against her cheek before she saw it coming. The sound echoed off marble and glass. The boys didn't stir. They were too deep in the first real sleep they'd known in weeks. Amara's head snapped to the side. A hot sting blossomed across her skin. For a moment she just breathed, slow, steady, eyes locked on his. There was no anger in them, only shock. And sorrow. "Pack your things," Alexander growled. "You're done here." She swallowed hard. "Sir, I said now." She looked down at the twins. Ethan's little hand clutched the sleeve of her cardigan, fingers twitching even in sleep. Her own hand hovered above his, aching to stay. "They begged me not to leave them," she whispered. "I stayed because they finally felt safe." Alexander's jaw worked, but he didn't answer. His fury left no room for reason. Amara leaned over, kissed each boy's forehead. "Good night, loves," she murmured. Then she slid from the bed, lifted her shoes quietly, and walked past him barefoot. He didn't stop her. He didn't even turn. Downstairs, the scent of lavender cleaner lingered as she descended the grand staircase. Mrs. Keller, the housekeeper, looked up from arranging the fresh lilies for the foyer vase. The red mark on Amara's cheek said everything. "Oh, my dear," Mrs. Keller's hand flew to her mouth. "It's fine," Amara said, voice low but steady. "They're asleep now." Rain pounded against the tall windows. She opened the heavy front door, pulled her coat tight around her, and stepped into the storm. Outside, the driveway glistened with silver puddles. The iron gates loomed ahead like sentinels. She didn't look back until she was nearly at the road. The mansion's windows glowed faintly, tall, cold eyes watching her go. Upstairs, Alexander stood where she'd left him. The room smelled faintly of soap and rain. He ran a hand through his hair, breath still ragged. On the bed, Ethan turned, curling into his brother's side. Their breathing stayed even. The silence pressed in. He moved closer, staring down at them. No twitching, no whimpering, no frantic clutching at blankets. For weeks, the boys had woken screaming for their mother. Doctors had prescribed medication, therapists had recommended specialized routines. 14 nannies had come and gone. None lasted more than a week. Yet this woman, the quiet one with the soft southern lilt and second-hand shoes, had done the impossible. He sat on the edge of the bed. A stuffed lion lay between the twins. Its mane was threadbare, its stitched smile crooked. Alexander picked it up, then froze. On the nightstand lay a folded piece of paper. He opened it. "If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will." No signature. Just that line, written in neat loops of ink. He read it again, throat tightening. The mirror on the far wall caught his reflection, a tall man in a drenched suit, anger draining from his face, replaced by something heavier, shame. Down the hall, Mrs. Keller appeared quietly at the door. "Sir," she said softly, "she didn't touch a thing in here. Only brought them in when the little one had a nosebleed." He didn't respond. "She stayed because they asked her to," the older woman added. "That's all." Alexander stared at the note, at his sons, at the faint rise and fall of their small chests. Rain tapped against the window like a metronome counting his regret. For the first time since his wife's funeral, the house was utterly still. Not grieving, just quiet. Peaceful. He exhaled, a sound closer to a sob than a sigh. "God," he whispered, "what have I done?" He left the note on the nightstand, folded exactly as he'd found it, and stepped back into the hallway. The floorboards creaked under his weight. Downstairs, the echo of the closing gate drifted through the rain, faint but final. Morning crept in gray and slow. The storm had passed, leaving mist over the garden and silence in its wake. Alexander sat at the long dining table, untouched coffee growing cold beside his hand. The house felt too still. The usual laughter, or cries, of the twins was missing. He stared at the doorway, waiting to hear their little footsteps. Mrs. Keller entered quietly. "They're awake, sir. They're asking for Miss Amara." He didn't look up. "Tell them she's gone." The old woman's disapproval filled the air like static. "They won't eat without her." He pressed a thumb and forefinger to his eyes. "Then they'll have to learn." But by noon, the sound of crying drifted down the hall. Not tantrum crying, gut-deep, trembling sobs. He followed the sound. Ethan sat on the playroom floor, arms wrapped around his brother, both faces red and wet. "Where's Miss Amara?" Eli hiccuped. "She said she'd stay." Alexander froze in the doorway. The words pierced sharper than any reprimand could. "She had to leave," he said quietly. "It was my decision." "You made her cry," Ethan said. "You yelled too much." Something inside him cracked. He knelt, reaching for them, but the boys turned away, clinging to each other instead. He rose without another word, stepping out before they saw his face. In his office, the light was dim. He sat behind his mahogany desk, staring at the shelves lined with awards, photographs, and business magazines, proof of success that suddenly felt meaningless. A soft knock came. Mrs. Keller entered holding a folded piece of fabric. "She forgot her scarf," she said, placing it gently on the desk. He looked at it, the same deep blue scarf she wore every morning, faintly scented of lavender and baby powder. "She kept the boys' schedules in the pocket," Mrs. Keller added. "You should see this." He unfolded the scarf, and a slip of notebook paper fell out. In Amara's neat handwriting, each day's notes filled the page. Tuesday, Ethan refused to eat again, sang to him till he smiled. Eli said he dreams of his mother, sat with him until dawn. They both need someone who stays. His throat tightened. He set the paper down carefully, as though it might break. "She's the only one who understood them," Mrs. Keller said softly. He rubbed a hand across his face. "I hit her," he whispered. "And she still stayed long enough to make sure they slept." Silence filled the room again, heavier this time. The rain had stopped, but its memory lingered in the damp air. Mrs. Keller hesitated, then spoke again. "She went to the bus station. Last I heard, she was catching the night coach back to Southridge. You might still find her if you hurry." He shook his head. "What would I even say?" "That you were wrong," she said simply. "And that they need her." After she left, he sat there for a long moment, the note open before him. The words blurred as his eyes watered, though he wouldn't admit it, even to himself. His phone buzzed, a message from his lawyer about an upcoming meeting. He ignored it. His gaze drifted instead to the photograph on his desk, his late wife, smiling, holding the twins when they were babies. "You'd have seen her," he murmured. "You'd have known." The guilt sank deeper, not the sharp kind that screams, but the quiet kind that stays. Later that evening, after the boys had fallen into restless half-sleep, Alexander stood outside their door. He listened to their murmured dreams, little whispers calling her name. He opened the door just wide enough to see Ethan clutching a stuffed lion, muttering through tears, "She said she'd stay." He shut the door softly and walked down the hall toward his room. On the nightstand, her first note still lay folded. He picked it up again, tracing the ink with his thumb. "If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will." He sank onto the bed. The silence in the house wasn't peace anymore, it was absence. Every room echoed with what he'd driven away. Downstairs, thunder rolled faintly in the distance again, but this time, he didn't move. He whispered into the dark, voice raw and small. "I pushed away the only person who cared." And somewhere beyond the gates, on a bus speeding through the night, Amara sat by the window, eyes fixed on the rain, unaware that the man who'd broken her spirit was sitting in a mansion finally realizing its emptiness. The city bus rattled through sheets of rain, headlights cutting tunnels of silver through the darkness. Amara sat by the window, her scarf gone, a bruise faint along her jaw. Her reflection wavered in the glass, half shadow, half light. She pressed her hands together in her lap to keep from shaking. The twins' laughter still echoed in her ears, their small fingers clutching her dress that morning, begging her not to go. She'd promised she wouldn't leave. And then she had. Across the aisle, an old woman watched her quietly. "You running from something, dear?" she asked. Amara smiled faintly. "Just heading home." The woman nodded, not convinced. "Sometimes home's the place that hurt us last. Sometimes it's the place that heals us next." Amara turned back to the window. The storm followed the bus like a curtain, swallowing the lights behind them. She thought of the boys, the way they'd curl into her when the nightmares came, the way their tiny hands trembled until she sang. She'd failed them. At the next stop, she stepped off into the wet street. The town was quieter, smaller than she remembered. The community center stood a few blocks from the terminal, its roof patched with tin, a flicker of light still glowing inside. Amara exhaled and started walking. At the same hour, miles away, the Hawthorne mansion felt hollow. Alexander stood in the nursery doorway. Toys were scattered where the twins had abandoned them mid-play. The air carried a faint trace of her, lavender oil, cocoa butter, the warmth of something human. Ethan sat curled on the rug, clutching the lion. Eli stared at the floor. "I can't sleep," Ethan whispered. Alexander stepped inside, kneeling. "What if I read you a story?" Eli shook his head. "She sings." "You don't." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The sting of truth burned sharper than any rebuke. "I can try," he said softly. But the words caught in his throat halfway through the first line. His voice was too rough, too unused to gentleness. The twins turned away, pulling the blanket over their heads. When he left the room, he didn't turn the light off. The housekeeper found him in the hall a few minutes later, one hand pressed against the wall as though holding it up. "They won't stop crying," he said. "They don't understand why she's gone," Mrs. Keller replied. He nodded once. "Neither do I." By dawn, the storm had broken. The estate grounds shimmered under a dull gray sky. Alexander went to the balcony outside his bedroom. Her umbrella was still there, leaning against the railing where she must have left it the night before. A simple black umbrella, one spoke bent out of shape. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. The handle was smooth, worn by use. There was a tiny sticker on one side, Amara's Angels, Community Youth Drive. He traced the words with his thumb, a slow breath leaving his chest. Back in Southridge, Amara swept the floor of the community center as morning light filtered through broken blinds. Children's drawings lined the walls, crayon suns, uneven hearts, words misspelled with love. She smiled faintly at them. "Amara," a familiar voice called from the office door. It was Nadine, her old friend and the center's coordinator. "You're back early." Amara nodded. "Needed to start over." Nadine studied her face, the bruise, the tired eyes. "He did that?" Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. "You still have a place here," Nadine said quietly. "Kids'll be happy to see you." Amara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you." As the first few children trickled in, she crouched down to greet them. One girl ran straight into her arms, giggling. Amara held her close, breathing in the scent of soap and rain. It hurt less when she was helping someone else. Still, every time she closed her eyes, she saw two little boys clutching a stuffed lion, whispering her name in their sleep. That night, the Hawthorne mansion's lights burned late. Alexander sat at his desk surrounded by unfinished work, papers untouched. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, tapping against the glass. He scrolled through his phone, past missed calls, until he found a picture he hadn't opened in months, his late wife holding the twins on the day they were born. Her eyes seemed to look straight through the screen, as if asking, "Are you doing enough for them?" He set the phone down and rubbed his temples. Across the room, the note lay under a paperweight, creased, edges soft from being handled too often. "If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will." He said the words aloud this time, quietly. Then again, slower, until they became a kind of prayer. Down the hall, a cry broke the silence. "Daddy!" He ran to the bedroom. Ethan sat up in bed, clutching his chest, sobbing. "What is it?" "I dreamed she was gone and nobody came back." Alexander gathered him into his arms. "It was just a dream." But he felt the truth of it in his bones. It wasn't. It was what he'd made real. When Ethan's sobs quieted, Alexander stayed there, holding both boys as they drifted back into uneasy sleep. He didn't move for a long time, staring at the rain streaking the windowpane, wondering how peace had slipped so far away. Back in Southridge, Amara locked the community center for the night. Her reflection in the door glass caught her off guard, strong, but tired. She walked home along the narrow street, shoes splashing through puddles. Her breath fogged the air. Somewhere, a church bell rang twice. She looked up, whispering to no one, "Let them be safe tonight." Her words faded into the rain. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to anymore. But in the stillness between heartbeats, she felt something shift, a quiet understanding that love wasn't about staying in one place. It was about being the reason someone else could finally sleep. And somewhere far behind her, in the mansion that still smelled faintly of her perfume, two small boys slept peacefully for the first time in days. 2 days later the Hawthorne estate was bright again, but brightness didn't reach the people inside. Alexander stood by the nursery window, watching the twins build a lopsided tower of blocks. Their laughter had returned in spurts, thin, uncertain. Every time a block fell, one of them would glance toward the door, waiting for a voice that never came. He'd made calls that morning. Every agency he spoke to mentioned the same name, Amara Johnson. No one knew where she'd gone, only that she'd once volunteered at a community center in Southridge. He stared down at his phone, thumb hovering over the screen, until Mrs. Keller's voice broke the silence. "You should go, sir." He looked up. "You won't fix anything sitting here," she said. "You'll only teach them that saying sorry means nothing." He grabbed his coat. The drive to Southridge took an hour. The further he went, the smaller the houses became. By the time he reached the edge of town, the asphalt had thinned to cracked concrete and puddles. A hand-painted sign read, "Community Youth Center, Amara's Angels." He parked and sat for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Then he climbed out and walked toward the sound of laughter. Inside, the walls were covered in children's art, handprints, stars, crooked rainbows. At the far end of the hall, Amara knelt beside a table, helping a little boy tie his shoes. The fluorescent light caught in her hair. When she looked up, she froze. Alexander stopped a few feet away, rain still clinging to his coat. For a moment neither spoke. The sound of kids shouting in the next room filled the space between them. He finally said, "You left your umbrella." Her eyes flicked to his hand, he was holding it like something fragile. "You came all this way to return that?" He shook his head. "No. I came because I was wrong." Amara straightened slowly. The boy beside her ran off to play. "About what exactly, Mr. Hawthorne?" "About you. About everything." His voice dropped. I hit you. And I can't take that back. But I can say I've hated myself for it every minute since." She crossed her arms, shoulders squared. "You think saying that fixes what you did?" "No," he admitted. "I'm not here to fix. I'm here to ask if you'll hear me out." For a long moment she said nothing. The hum of the old heater filled the silence. Finally she gestured toward a side door. 5 minutes. Then I get back to work." In the small office, the window rattled from the wind outside. She sat behind the desk, he remained standing. "I don't excuse what happened," he began. "I lost my temper. I thought," he exhaled. "Truth is, I was angry long before you showed up. Angry at losing my wife. At failing my sons. You walked into a fire already burning." Amara met his gaze evenly. "And you made sure I got burned too." He nodded once. "Yes. And I'm sorry." Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "Sorry doesn't raise children, Mr. Hawthorne." "No. But the right person does. And that person was you." She looked away, jaw tightening. "You don't get to decide that now." He stepped closer, carefully. "The boys haven't slept since you left. They ask for you every night. They need you, Amara." Her name from his mouth startled her more than she expected. "And what about me?" she asked quietly. "What do I need?" He hesitated. "Tell me." She stood, folding her arms. "If I ever set foot in that house again, things change." "Anything," he said. "No cameras in their rooms. No locked doors. You eat dinner with them, every night." He nodded. "Done. And you learn to listen before you shout." "I'll try," he said honestly. "No," she replied. "You'll do it." Their eyes held. For the first time, the anger between them gave way to something else, truth stripped bare. Finally, she sighed. "One more thing. If you ever raise your hand again, that's it. I walk out, and this time I don't come back." "I understand," he said. "You have my word." She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "I'll come back. But for them, not for you." A small smile ghosted his lips. "That's good enough for me." That evening, the black sedan pulled up to the gates of Hawthorne Estate. The twins were on the porch with Mrs. Keller when Amara stepped out. For half a heartbeat they stared, unsure if it was real. Then both boys bolted forward, shouting her name. She knelt as they crashed into her arms. "Easy, easy," she laughed, tears spilling before she could stop them. Ethan's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "You came back." "Of course I did, baby. I told you I would." Alexander watched from a few steps away. The scene blurred for him, edges soft. It was the sound, the giggle that filled the air, that made his throat close. It was the same sound his wife used to make when the boys were babies. Mrs. Keller wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. "About time," she muttered. Amara looked up at Alexander. Where's the note? He blinked. The one you left. In my office. Keep it, she said. You'll need the reminder. Later that night, the four of them sat around the kitchen island eating reheated pasta. The twins chattered between mouthfuls, updating her on everything she'd missed in 2 days. Ethan lost a tooth, Eli drew a dragon. Alexander mostly listened, learning their rhythms again. Amara leaned back in her chair, watching them. For the first time, the house felt alive, messy, noisy, human. When the boys finally drifted to sleep, she stood to leave, but Alexander stopped her at the hallway. You don't have to stay upstairs anymore, he said. You can take the guest room next to theirs. Closer if they wake. She gave a small nod. That's sensible. He hesitated, then added, thank you, for giving me another chance. Amara's gaze met his. I didn't give you a chance, Mr. Hawthorne. The boys did. Then she turned and disappeared down the corridor. Later, Alexander wandered back to the bedroom where the story had begun. The bed was neatly made now, the windows open to the night air. He sat on the edge, remembering her standing there, defiant in the dark. He whispered into the quiet, she's back. For the first time in a long while, the words sounded like hope. Down the hall, Amara peeked into the twins' room. Both slept soundly, arms flung across each other, the lion toy wedged between them. She smiled and closed the door halfway. As she walked toward her room, she paused at the stair landing. The moonlight spilled across the marble, pale and forgiving. For a moment, she let herself breathe, really breathe. In the stillness of the night, two souls who had broken each other found the first fragile thread of healing, one built not on forgetting, but on the courage to begin again. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Hawthorne kitchen, painting the marble counters gold. For the first time in months, the house smelled of pancakes and laughter. Amara stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, humming softly as she flipped another pancake. The twins sat at the island, faces dusted with flour, stirring bowls of syrup far too eagerly. Miss Amara, Ethan said, trying to balance a blueberry on his fork. Do we have to wait for Daddy? She smiled. Yes, you do. We start together now. That's the rule. Eli grinned. A new rule. The first of many. She winked. Footsteps echoed behind them. Alexander entered, dressed down in jeans and a white shirt, a sight rare enough to make the boys stop mid-bite. He hesitated in the doorway, unsure if he was intruding on something sacred. Morning, he said. Amara didn't turn. You're just in time to enforce the no phones rule. He blinked. No phones. Breakfast is for people, not screens. She set the last plate on the table. House Rules version 2.0. Eli whispered to his brother, she's the boss now. Alexander almost smiled. So I've noticed. They sat together. The boys chattered endlessly, about their favorite cartoon, about the frog they found in the garden pond. Alexander listened, sometimes answering, mostly learning. Amara noticed how his shoulders eased, how his laughter came easier now, rough but real. After breakfast, the twins dragged him outside to show their castle, a makeshift fort built from boxes and old sheets. He crawled inside after them, still in disbelief that a man who once spent his days in boardrooms was now crouching in a cardboard tower wearing a paper crown. From the porch, Amara watched them, sunlight soft on her face. Mrs. Keller joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. Never thought I'd see him on his knees again, the older woman said with a smirk. Amara smiled faintly. He's trying. That's something. Mrs. Keller nodded, eyes kind. You've changed this place, dear. Feels like a home again. That afternoon, Amara gathered everyone in the living room. On the coffee table lay a blank sheet of poster board and colored markers. All right, she said, clapping her hands. Time to write the new house rules. Eli grabbed a marker. Rule number 1, pancakes every Sunday. Amara laughed. Approved. Rule 2, Ethan said. No yelling. Alexander nodded. Agreed. Rule 3, Amara added. Ask before hugs. The twins exchanged looks. Even you. Even me, she said gently. Everyone deserves to choose when they're touched. It's how we show respect. Alexander looked at her then, understanding dawning, she wasn't just healing the children, she was teaching him too. Rule 4, he said quietly. If someone's scared, we listen first. Amara's eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, neither looked away. Eli scribbled down each rule with oversized letters until the poster was full. Mrs. Keller appeared with tape to hang it on the fridge. When she stepped back, the bright poster looked like a declaration of peace after a long war. Days turned into weeks. The house began to breathe again. The twins learned to sleep without nightmares. Sometimes Amara sang, sometimes Alexander sat by the door just listening, his expression unreadable. When the boys finally slept, she'd find him in the study, stacks of work untouched. Still awake, she'd ask. He'd smile faintly. Still learning. Their conversations grew easier. He began helping in small ways, setting the table, reading bedtime stories, even attempting pancakes, though his first batch ended in smoke and laughter. One evening, after the twins went to bed, he found her sitting on the back porch, watching the garden lights flicker. They're happy, he said, stepping beside her. She nodded. They're healing. So am I, he murmured. The air between them was quiet, charged with unspoken things. She looked at him, really looked at him, not the man who'd once lost his temper, but the one trying every day to be better than he was. I can see that, she said softly. He turned to her. I never asked, why you stayed that night. Amara tilted her head, thinking. Because they needed someone who wouldn't run. I didn't have that growing up. I wanted to be it for them. He nodded slowly, eyes on the horizon. You've done more for them than anyone else ever has. She smiled faintly. Then let's make sure it stays that way. One Sunday morning, as the smell of syrup and laughter filled the air again, Amara stood at the sink washing dishes. The twins ran past with paper airplanes, Alexander chasing after them, pretending to be a dragon. Beware, he shouted. The pancake dragon is hungry. Ethan shrieked with laughter. You can't catch us. Amara leaned against the counter, watching them with quiet joy. For a moment, everything was exactly as it should be, no ghosts of grief, no bitterness, just light. Mrs. Keller passed behind her, whispering, You've done the impossible, dear. Amara shook her head, eyes never leaving the family in front of her. No, she said softly. We all did. That evening, as twilight spread across the estate, the twins gathered around her while she tucked them in. Miss Amara? Eli mumbled sleepily. If you ever leave again, can we come too? Her heart clenched. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. Ethan yawned. Promise? Promise, she whispered, brushing their hair back. When she stepped into the hall, Alexander was waiting there, leaning against the wall. The light was dim, golden. Thank you, he said again, voice thick. For staying. She smiled faintly. I told them I would. Sometimes, keeping your word is the only thing that matters. Later, she stood by her window, the house bathed in moonlight. For the first time since she arrived, she let herself rest, no longer the outsider, not yet family, but something in between. The bridge that turned loss into life again. And somewhere in another room, Alexander whispered to the quiet. She stayed. The words were small, but they carried the weight of a man finally learning what love sounded like. The days blurred into a gentle routine. Breakfast laughter. School drop-offs. Evenings filled with stories and music. For once, the Hawthorne estate felt alive, until the envelope arrived. It was thick, sealed with a silver crest, Hawthorne and Blake, attorneys at law. Alexander stood in his office holding it, the weight of old ghosts pressing down. When he opened it, the words leapt off the page. Petition for custody review, filed by Richard and Eleanor Whitmore. He read it twice. His late wife's parents. The very people who hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. Mrs. Keller found him still standing there. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the letter. Her eyes widened. "They're trying to take the boys." He nodded. "They claim I'm unfit. That the environment isn't stable. That I hired an unqualified caretaker." She went pale. "They mean Miss Amara." He pressed his palms into the desk. "They're using her to get to me." Down the hall, laughter echoed, Amara and the twins baking muffins. The sound stabbed through the silence, cruel in its innocence. Mrs. Keller's voice dropped. "You have to tell her." He shook his head. "Not yet." That night, Amara noticed the distance. He was quieter at dinner, eyes distant even as Ethan told a story about school. After the twins were asleep, she found him in the study, staring at a half-finished glass of whiskey. "You've been somewhere else all evening," she said. "What's going on?" He looked up, hesitation flickering before he slid the envelope toward her. She unfolded the papers. Her eyes scanned the words, expression hardening with each line. "They're suing you for custody." He nodded. "They're calling me negligent. Citing repeated staff turnover and a violent incident involving household help." The phrase hit like a slap. "So I'm their weapon now," she said bitterly. "The woman you struck once, that's their evidence." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it." "No," she said firmly. "We'll handle it." He blinked. "Amara, you don't have to." "I do," she cut in. "Because they're not just attacking you. They're attacking what those boys finally found here: safety, family, peace." He stared at her, awe softening the fear behind his eyes. "They'll drag your name through the mud. I've lived through worse." She folded the papers neatly and set them down. "When's the hearing?" 2 weeks. She nodded. "Then we start preparing." The following days felt heavier. Reporters sniffed around the estate. Old rumors surfaced, gossip columns resurrecting his temper, his past. Amara bore the whispers with quiet strength, never raising her voice, never hiding from the truth. The twins sensed the tension. One evening, Ethan asked, "Miss Amara, are they gonna take us away?" She froze, spoon midair. "Who told you that?" "Mrs. Keller was talking to Daddy," Eli said softly. "We heard." Amara knelt between them, voice steady. "No one's taking you anywhere. Do you hear me?" "But Mommy's parents." "Family isn't just blood," she said. "It's who stays. And we're staying." They threw their arms around her. For the first time since the envelope arrived, she let herself cry, silently, between their small shoulders. That night, she found Alexander pacing the balcony. Papers littered the table, the weight of the world pressing against his posture. "You're doing that thing again," she said gently. He turned. "What thing?" "Blaming yourself for something you didn't cause." He looked away. "They'll use everything against me. My temper. The way I handled things. What I did to you." Amara stepped closer. "Then let them. Because the man they're describing doesn't exist anymore." He met her eyes, the truth of that statement almost too much to bear. "You make me want to be someone different," he said quietly. "Then be him," she whispered. "Not for me. For them." He nodded slowly. "Would you testify?" She didn't hesitate. Of course. He blinked. Even after everything? Especially after everything. She touched his arm lightly. They need to see what change looks like. The following week, preparation began. Lawyers visited, records were gathered. Amara endured interviews, each question probing deeper, why she stayed, what happened that night, how she could trust him again. Each time, her answer was simple, because he learned. At night, when the house went quiet, she practiced her statement by the kitchen window, whispering lines to the reflection in the glass. She didn't want to sound rehearsed, she wanted to sound real. The boys watched her one evening, curiosity in their eyes. "Are you scared?" Eli asked. She smiled softly. "A little." "What do you do when you're scared?" Ethan asked. "You breathe," she said. "Then you tell the truth." They nodded solemnly, as though committing it to memory. The night before the hearing, the house gathered for dinner. The twins were unusually quiet, each lost in his own world. Halfway through the meal, Ethan spoke. "If they ask us who we want to live with, we'll say you and Daddy." "Both." Alexander looked at him, throat tightening. "That means a lot, son." Eli frowned. "Will the judge believe us?" Amara reached across the table, covering both their hands. "He'll believe what he feels. Just be honest." For a long moment, they all sat there, a patchwork family bound not by perfection, but by the promise of trying again. Later that night, Alexander knocked on Amara's door. She was packing her bag with documents and notes. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He shook his head. "Tomorrow's going to be rough." She zipped the bag closed. "Maybe. But rough doesn't scare me anymore." He managed a faint smile. "You're braver than anyone I've ever met." She turned toward him. "Bravery isn't loud. Sometimes it's just doing the right thing, even when no one claps." They stood there in the soft lamplight, the distance between them charged and quiet. "I don't say this enough," he said finally. "But thank you, for not giving up on us." Amara's voice softened. "I almost did. Then I saw what we could be if we all stayed." He wanted to say more, but the words caught. Instead, he stepped back, nodding once. "See you in court, Miss Johnson." "Don't call me that," she said with a small grin. "Makes it sound like you're losing already." He laughed under his breath, the first genuine laugh in days. Noted. That night, rain began again, softer this time, like a heartbeat against the windows. The twins slept soundly, unaware of the storm gathering outside their world. Amara stood by her window, eyes on the driveway lights reflecting on wet stone. She whispered to herself. "Whatever happens, we stay." Across the hall, Alexander did the same, staring at the same rain, thinking of the same promise. Tomorrow would decide everything. But tonight, for the first time, neither of them felt alone. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and rain-damp coats. The ceilings were too high, the benches too hard, the silence too heavy. Alexander straightened his tie for the third time while the twins fidgeted beside Mrs. Keller in the front row. Amara sat behind the counsel table, hands folded neatly in her lap, posture calm but eyes alert. Across the aisle, Richard and Eleanor Whitmore sat like carved marble, grief worn into sharp edges. Their lawyer adjusted his cufflinks, the picture of confidence. The judge entered. "This court will come to order." The Whitmore's attorney opened first. His words were polished, smooth, practiced. "Your Honor, my clients seek custody out of concern, not cruelty. Since their daughter's death, Mr. Hawthorne has exhibited volatility, 14 nannies dismissed, 1 assaulted. His household is unstable, his judgment compromised. These children deserve consistent care and moral safety, something their current environment cannot provide." The lawyer turned toward Amara. "Miss Johnson, you were the assaulted party, correct?" She stood. Yes. He nodded slowly. And yet you returned to employment under the same man who struck you? Yes. Why? His tone implied incredulity. Amara's gaze didn't waver. Because the children needed me. And because he apologized. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The lawyer smiled thinly. You accept apologies easily, Miss Johnson. I accept change, she said. The judge leaned forward slightly. Clarify, please. When someone learns from what they did and works to be better, that's not weakness to forgive. It's hope. The attorney shifted tactics. Miss Johnson, you have no formal childcare license. No degree in psychology. What qualifies you to care for these children? She took a breath. Love does. Patience does. Showing up every single day does. He scoffed lightly. Love isn't a credential. No, she said softly. But it's the reason they sleep through the night again. The courtroom stilled. Even the judge paused before nodding for her to continue. Amara stepped closer to the bench. When I first came to that house, those boys woke up screaming every hour. They'd lost their mother. They didn't need another employee, they needed safety. They needed someone to stay when it got hard. Her voice trembled just enough to sound human, not rehearsed. So I stayed. The judge glanced toward Alexander. He sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on her. Amara turned back to the lawyer. You asked what qualifies someone to love children who aren't theirs. The answer's simple. Choosing them, again and again, even when you could walk away. Richard Whitmore stood suddenly. And what about their blood? Their heritage? You think you can replace their mother? Amara met his anger with quiet strength. No one replaces a mother. I just remind them she'd want them loved. Eleanor's lip quivered, the ice cracking. The judge tapped his gavel gently. Mr. Whitmore, please. The lawyer muttered an apology and sat. The judge turned to Alexander. Mr. Hawthorne, do you wish to respond? He rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. Yes, Your Honor. He faced the court, the ghosts of arrogance gone. Everything they said about my past is true. I was angry. I hurt people I cared about. I made my home a place of fear instead of comfort. He swallowed hard. But I learned because she taught me. She taught me how to listen to my sons, how to forgive myself enough to be better for them. The man I was, died the day she walked out. The man standing here is the one who begged her to come back. Silence. Only the rain against the windows. He continued, voice rough. Those boys have already lost one parent. They don't need to lose the people who finally taught them peace. He sat down again, eyes glistening. The judge's gaze swept the room. The court will recess for 10 minutes. Outside in the hallway, Alexander leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Amara joined him quietly. You did good, she said. He laughed weakly. You were extraordinary. Don't say that. Just mean it. I do. He wanted to reach for her hand but didn't. The space between them was filled with everything they hadn't yet said. When the court reconvened, the judge's voice carried a new gentleness. This case is unusual. The petitioners acted out of love for their grandchildren, Mr. Hawthorne acted out of love for his sons, and Miss Johnson, out of love for all of them. He shuffled his notes. The question before me is not who loves the boys, but who provides what they need most, stability, safety, and sincerity. He paused. Custody remains with Mr. Hawthorne. Petition denied. A sharp gasp escaped Eleanor before she covered her mouth. The judge continued, however, I urge continued contact between the children and their maternal family. Healing requires more than victory. The gavel fell. Court adjourned. The twins leapt from the front row and ran to Alexander, wrapping their arms around his legs. "We're staying home," Ethan shouted. He laughed through tears, lifting them both. "Yes, you are." Amara smiled, relief flooding through her. Richard and Eleanor approached slowly. For a heartbeat Alexander braced for another battle, but Eleanor surprised him. She extended her hand to Amara. "You fought for them like they were yours," she said softly. "Our daughter would have liked you." Amara blinked back tears. "Thank you." Richard managed a stiff nod toward Alexander. "Take care of them." "I will," Alexander said. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing, but Alexander ignored them. He opened the car door for the twins, then turned to Amara. "They're going to talk," he said quietly. "Let them," she replied. "We'll just keep living." He smiled. A small, grateful smile that reached his eyes. "You know, I think that's the first time I've walked out of a courtroom feeling free." "Freedom looks good on you," she said. He laughed, shaking his head. "Let's go home." The drive back was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a deep exhale. The twins fell asleep in the back seat, holding hands. Amara watched them through the mirror, her own heart steady for the first time in weeks. At the gate, Alexander stopped the car. "I want to show you something." He led her through the garden path, still damp from rain. At the far end stood a patch of freshly turned soil and two young saplings, their leaves trembling in the wind. "I planted these after the first hearing date," he said. "For them. To remind me what growing back looks like." Amara knelt, touching the damp earth. "You're learning fast." He crouched beside her. "Not fast enough." They stood in silence for a long moment, the air filled with the smell of wet grass and the faint hum of crickets. Then she whispered, "You did good today." "So did you." They looked at each other, no anger, no guilt, only respect. That night, as the boys slept peacefully in their beds, the house settled into a deep, living quiet. Alexander lingered outside their room, watching through the crack in the door. Amara appeared beside him, arms crossed loosely. "They're dreaming good dreams again," she said. "Because you stayed," he answered. She smiled softly. "Because we all did." He nodded. "Tomorrow, let's start thinking about the future." "I already am," she said. "One that belongs to all of us." 6 months later, the world outside the Hawthorne estate bloomed into spring. The air smelled of cut grass and magnolia. The sound of children's laughter drifted from the backyard, where Ethan and Eli chased each other through the sprinklers, their giggles echoing across the lawn. From the terrace, Amara watched them, sunlight spilling across her face. She still wore the same soft curls, the same quiet confidence, but something in her eyes had changed. The exhaustion was gone. In its place lived peace. Behind her, Alexander approached carrying 2 mugs of lemonade. "They've gotten faster," he said, smiling as one twin shrieked and fell into the grass. "They've gotten freer," Amara corrected, accepting a mug. He nodded. "You were right about the garden. It's their favorite part of the house now." She chuckled. "Because it doesn't have walls." He leaned against the railing beside her. "That used to scare me, no walls." "What changed?" "You did." She looked at him. He didn't look like the man she first met, the sharp suits, the cold stare. There were laugh lines now, a warmth that no one could fake. "I only showed you what was already there," she said. "You chose to use it." He smiled quietly. "I'm still learning." Later that afternoon, the house filled with people. Banners hung across the foyer. Grand opening. The Hawthorne Johnson Center for Family Healing. Volunteers moved through the halls, arranging flowers and brochures. Children from the community center ran in, squealing with excitement. The same little girl who once hugged Amara on her first night back in Southridge now clutched her hand again, eyes wide. "You built this?" she asked. Amara smiled. "We built it." The center was attached to the estate now, a renovated wing turned safe space for single parents, trauma counseling, and children's workshops. What had once been cold marble corridors now carried the sound of new beginnings. Alexander stood by the podium, greeting guests and reporters. When the crowd gathered, he raised a hand. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "For a long time, this house was filled with silence. Today, it's filled with purpose." He turned toward Amara. "And it's thanks to someone who taught me that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about building something worth remembering." Applause rippled through the crowd. Amara stepped forward, cheeks flushed. She spoke simply. "When I first came here, I thought I was just a nanny. But these boys taught me more about courage than I ever taught them. This place is for families like ours, messy, imperfect, but trying. Because staying isn't easy. But it's worth it." The room erupted into applause again. Ethan and Eli ran to her, each holding one of her hands. Alexander placed his hand on their shoulders. "Ready?" They nodded. Together, they cut the ribbon. That evening, when the crowd was gone and twilight melted into blue, the four of them stood outside beneath the saplings they'd planted months before. The trees had grown taller, leaves bright and alive. Between them stood a small stone marker engraved with words Amara had written. "For those who choose to stay, and those they save by staying." Eli traced the letters with his finger. "Will these trees get big?" "Someday," Amara said. "And when they do, they'll shade other families who come here." Alexander looked down at her. "You always think ahead. Someone has to." He smiled. "That's why we make a good team." The twins darted toward the garden again, chasing fireflies. Their laughter mixed with the soft buzz of evening. Amara leaned back against the fence post, watching them. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember what it felt like the first night they slept through till morning. That's when I knew I belonged." He nodded slowly. "You built a home here, Amara. For them. For me." She turned to face him. "For anyone who needs one." Later that night, after the boys were in bed, the house felt different, not empty, but alive in a quieter way. Music drifted from the living room stereo, something soft and old. Alexander found Amara there, folding the new center's flyers. "You know," he said, "the papers are calling you the miracle nanny." She laughed under her breath. "I'm nobody's miracle. I'm just someone who stayed when others didn't." He stepped closer, voice low. "That's exactly what makes you a miracle." She looked up, eyes catching the lamplight. "You still working on being poetic, Mr. Hawthorne?" "Call me Alexander," he said softly. Her lips curved. "We'll see." They both laughed, easy, unforced. Weeks passed. The center grew busier. Families arrived from across the city, single fathers with frightened toddlers, mothers rebuilding after loss. Amara guided them all, gentle but firm, her calm presence the anchor of the place. Alexander managed the logistics, the funding, the press. But whenever he felt overwhelmed, he'd walk into one of the children's rooms and just listen. The laughter reminded him why they built it. One afternoon, he found Amara kneeling beside a new child, a girl no older than 8, quiet and wary. "What's your name?" Amara asked. "Belle," the girl whispered. "Hi, Belle. Do you want to draw something?" The child hesitated, then nodded. She took a crayon and began sketching, a small house, 2 big trees, a woman with long curls holding 2 hands. Amara blinked. "That's beautiful." Belle looked up shyly. "It's you," she said. Amara smiled, her chest tightening in that familiar, bittersweet way. Then you'll have to help me draw the rest of the family. Alexander watched from the doorway, the scene tugging at him. He knew this was how it began again, one child at a time. That night, they stood outside together, looking over the garden where the twins now played with Belle. Fireflies flickered in the air like living stars. "Another angel for your center," he said. "She found us," Amara replied. He studied her profile, the strength, the softness. "You really changed everything, didn't you?" She smiled faintly. "I just showed you how to open the door." The air cooled as the moon rose. The twins ran up the path, dragging Belle by the hand. "We caught one," Ethan shouted, opening his palm to reveal a glowing firefly. Amara knelt. "Make a wish," she told them. Eli whispered, "that we all stay together." She met Alexander's eyes. He nodded, barely holding back emotion. The children released the firefly, watching it drift into the night until its light vanished among the stars. Inside, the lights dimmed. Amara tucked the twins and Belle into bed, humming softly. When she stepped into the hall, Alexander was there, leaning against the doorframe. "They asked if you were staying forever," he said. "What did you tell them?" "That forever starts one day at a time." She smiled. "Good answer." He hesitated. "Does that mean you'll stay too?" Amara's eyes softened. "I already have." They stood there in the quiet, the air thick with unspoken gratitude. Sometime after midnight, Amara wandered into the garden again. The saplings swayed gently under the moonlight. She crouched down, pressing her hand into the cool soil, and whispered, "Thank you." Behind her, Alexander's voice came low. "For what?" "For letting me stay." He stepped beside her. "No. Thank you for teaching me how." She looked up at him, smiling. The breeze moved through the leaves, carrying the faintest scent of lavender. He extended his hand. She took it. The final image. Morning light over the estate. The children raced through the garden, Belle among them. The saplings are taller now, green and strong. Amara and Alexander stand on the porch, side by side, watching as laughter fills the air. The camera would linger, on the house, the garden, the sky. No words needed. Just the echo of Amara's promise. Sometimes the world doesn't change because of money or power, but because someone decided to stay.